I'm going to talk about, I know the topic is the clean aspect of the clean, safe, serene motto, waste disposal and compartmentalization. So what I'm going to present is just the waste management approaches, some of the regulatory, some of the policies, and some of the regulations that are coming to deal with waste in general. So some of the key drivers for waste management in a Trinidad and Tobago context and also in a global context. We all know about the global goals for sustainable development, the 17 goals that are there. There are two that speak specifically to waste management and recycling and prevention, etc. We have the Vision 2020 document that is now being revised, the Vision 2030, where there's which also speaks to waste management. The Government Manifesto, which, as you know, becomes policy later down the road. The Environmental Management Act, which gives the EMA the mandate to do certain objectives, achieve certain objectives. The National Environmental Policy of 2006, which is to be revised, and some of the subsidiary legislation dealing with waste management. So as I mentioned previously, these are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and the key word here is sustainable development, as previously they were Millennium Development Goals, but these are now premised on sustainability. And 11 and 12 is what focuses on the waste stream, as we like to call it. So these global sustainable goals have certain targets and certain milestones, etc., associated with them. So these, you can use this to formulate your own government policy, etc. So by one of the targets under sustainable cities and communities, by 2030, reduce the adverse per capita environmental impact of cities, including by paying special attention to air quality and municipal and other waste management. And under Sustainable Goal 12, responsible consumption and production, by 2020, achieve the environmentally sound management of chemicals and all waste throughout their life cycle. Again, it talks about the cradle-to-grave approach in accordance with the agreed international framework, so it speaks to all these international conventions, and significantly reduce their releases to water, all the various environmental compartments, air, water, and land, in order to minimize adverse impacts on human health and environment. And also by 2030, substantially reduce waste generation through prevention, reduction, recycling, and reuse. And later on in the presentation, you would see the waste management hierarchy, which previously used to be where the major form of this management was disposal at landfills and incineration, but that is now inverted to where the major thrust is on source reduction and prevention at source. The Vision 2020 document, the draft national plan, states under the environmental framework, Objective 1, so this is an excerpt from this document, to increase governance related to the environment and strengthen the enforcement of environmental regulations. So it gives that aspect of strengthening the regulatory arm. Improve resource capability and coordination between relevant state entities, including the Town and Country Planning Division, the Municipal Corporation, and the EMA. So a central role is coordination. Implementing environmental management systems. These are voluntary systems, as you all know. Environmental management system 14,001, etc. In industries to curb and also conduct part of the environmental management systems. You have to do periodic audits to ensure that you're meeting your targets. Also, under this framework on the environment, track illegal waste disposal, and also revising of subsidiary legislation for overall protection. And we'll talk a little bit about later in terms of what the intention of these regulations, these draft regulations is about. And in the government manifesto, there's a clear statement that says they need to establish a clear action plan for waste management and that promotes local recycling. And this is in keeping with the theme that we talked about this morning about involving community and making it more personal. So these are some of this slide just shows some of the various pieces of policies and various bills that have been prepared over time that deals with waste management. So you have the National Environmental Policy that I mentioned that was revised in 2006. The first one was done in 1998, revised in 2006, and the EMA is presently looking to revise the National Environmental Policy. As you know, that sets the overall framework for how the environment is to be managed in all sectors. There's also the Integrated Solid Waste Management, Resource Management Policy for Trinidad and Tobago, which was developed in 2012. There's a National Waste Recycling Policy that was developed earlier this year. There's also amendments to the Import and Export Control Regulations of 1941 that deal specifically with specific license you need to have when you're exporting certain commodities of waste. Example, if you're exporting used lead-acid batteries, you first have to get an export license from the Ministry of Trade. And to get that license, that is also linked to the requirements of the Basel Convention under the Transboundary Movement and Control of Hazardous Waste. So there's a linkage there between the Ministry of Trade and the EMA for people who want to export used lead-acid batteries. As you know, those ULABs are they're called hazardous material. We have many examples where some of these batteries were exported, end up in countries that had to be returned to Trinidad and Tobago because there was no prior informed consent procedure established. Then we have some of the subsidiary legislation under the Environmental Management Act, like the CEC rules, which many of you are familiar with. Then there's also the Code of Practice. So the CEC rules would, as you all know, the intention is for any new development or any significantly modified expansion or operations, you need to get environmental clearance from the EMA before the project comes to fruition. And they are listed for about 44 designated activities. And what that does is to ensure that all the impacts, because you know nearly every project would have some impacts, but the purpose of these rules is to ensure that there's consideration and there are mitigation measures, conditions which you have to meet in order for this project to be allowed. And there's also the Code of Practice for Biomedical Waste, which is something that has been implemented since 2012 for the health sector. There's the Shipping Marine Bill of 2014, the Beverage Container Bill, as these are all bills as yet, they are not made an act as yet. And as I mentioned previously, we have draft waste management rules that we will have to revise in keeping with some of the overarching policy instruments that I mentioned previously. So I'll just go quickly, because I'm reminded I have just about a few minutes again. This is just an overview of what the draft hazardous waste rules is intended to deal with. It deals with 3 schedules. Schedule 1 deals with the different types of hazardous waste streams, and then Schedule 2 deals with acute hazardous waste streams. Schedule 3 deals with incineration and various categories of waste generators. These are some of the categories there. And it says that anybody who's handling any hazardous waste will have to get a permit from the EMA. And also, the importation of hazardous waste into the country is prohibited in keeping with the National Environmental Policy. And we all know some of these existing problems with waste in the country. The landfills are running out of space, they are attaining their maximum, they're exceeding or meeting and exceeding their design capacity, which has effects down the road. Terrestrial and marine litter, we see that every day. I talked about illegal transshipment and then improper handling and disposal of waste. We don't have any dedicated hazardous waste facilities in the country. We just have these landfills, the 3 major landfills. Forest Park landfill is the only landfill that you would have where disposal of special waste takes place. And the presenter after may be talking about some of those issues. Some challenges and opportunities for effective waste management. We all know about the fragmented approach to regulatory management in the country, so there's an opportunity to codify and modernize, and lack of coordinated approach with other state agencies, greater education and awareness, which was mentioned previously, and then harmonization of draft regulations with other government policy and the global sustainable goals. I mentioned previously about the inverted pyramid, which previously landfilling and incineration were the primary means of disposal. That is now changed, and the more preferred option is source reduction and reuse, and the last option you should be thinking about is disposal and incineration. And this, I will just end with, these are just some waste models to consider. Where the world is heading countries are heading is to zero waste discharges or zero waste generation. And these are just some of the mechanisms whereby which you can achieve the zero waste initiative. So I think I've exceeded my time and I'll stop there.